I think people are kind of afraid because they don't really know what it's like to actually get COVID, and is it a true, death sentence? Obviously, yes, it's affecting a lot of folks. I mean, I know, a few people already that have passed from it, unfortunately. But there's also the brighter side of this all. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, not just for folks who are joining at this moment. We love you, but then even for those who are also going to be tuning in a little bit later as well. So,
yeah, yeah. So for us, knowing that there was a health-based war. That's essentially what this is, right? The pandemic. We knew, because my husband is in medicine, so we knew that the effect on him would be a little more involved. We knew that the likelihood of him getting COVID was higher than somebody who wasn't necessarily working in the hospital. Now, obviously, as most people, we kind of followed the news. That's all I'm going to say about that, as best we could to prepare ourselves. But at the end of the day, we couldn't prepare ourselves, because how do we know? Yeah. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody was prepared. We just didn't know. And so I think everything moved really fast. And for us, it was, oh, okay, other medical families, some of them were separating to reduce risks. Some people were disinfecting everything in their garage and running inside. We did that. We still do that.
Because your husband was actually working, like, he's frontline.
He's in the
working
hospital.
In the hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
He's in the hospital. He's an anesthesiologist. So he's intubating. He's dealing with, people who are in respiratory distress for different things. And at the time, it was kind of like, well, how do we know what to be prepared for? What do we do? We didn't think what happens when he gets COVID. It was more of, what do we do to not get it? And I think that's the idea that, oh, well, the more careful we all are, the likelihood of us not getting it is higher. And I don't know if that's true, but, yet to be determined. There's not enough information. But for us, it was okay, let's take the precautions. Let's see what happens. Let's see if we can protect ourselves. And the worst fear, I feel like, for us was, oh my God, what happens if he gets COVID? What happens if he gets COVID? Well, lo and behold, he was perfectly fine. And then on a Wednesday, came home, looked exhausted. And mind you, my husband doesn't get sick very often. He's a healthy 41-year-old guy, runs. I think he ran that morning, it was one of those things. And the evening, he just felt awful, beyond awful, worse than the flu. And he's had the flu this year. So we knew something was off, because it happened within 3 hours, where he's like, Shaquille, I don't really feel very good. I'm going to him with a thermometer, like he's a little kid, taking his temperature. And I'm like, you have a fever. I'm like, are you feeling okay? And he's like, I really don't feel good. He just felt like the wind was out from underneath him. And so obviously we knew that this could be a risk. I think COVID was only 2 weeks. I don't think the states were completely shelter
really
at
closed.
home yet. Yeah, this was before all of that. This was the
you guys got
March.
It super early on.
Super early. So we really had no information a little over a month ago. And so obviously I quarantined him the best that we could, and he was in his room, and he was knocked out. I mean, he was knocked out as in he didn't have energy to drink. He had muscle aches. The fever went on for about 3 days. And by the third day, we couldn't even quarantine him in that room anymore, because as a family, there is only so much. And we tried our best. And, Neeta knows this is part of my story, and I don't mind sharing here, but I'm a chronic pain patient. And so for me, it was how am I supposed to make house ends meet if I can't use my hands? And so we took him out of quarantine by day 3, because I was like, as soon as his fever was gone, day 4, he was back out with us. And so we all got exposed, and we kind of knew that that was going to be a risk, but it was a calculated risk, because we thought, listen, if we're all exposed and this is the version that we have, then at least we can all be together, versus one parent somewhere, another parent somewhere else. My family's far away, his family's far away. What is the next best thing? And that's what we did. And so we all got the infection. For me personally, because of my condition, the muscle aches were the worst for me, but I never even had a fever. I mean, sore throat like he did.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
Like,
You didn't have a fever and then he had a fever.
No
So you
fever.
guys were presenting very different symptoms,
Very
it seems
differently.
like.
And we're only like a few years apart. So it's not like he's significantly older than me. He's not a dinosaur next to me. So like he had a fever for 3 days, me no fever. We both had sore throats. Day 4, day 5, we started having a little bit of like GI distress.
Okay, so you had really, GI, the stomach issues and everything,
stomach
going
issues,
to the bathroom.
Almost like, and it wasn't even, the sore throat wasn't even the strep. It was like this weird, for me, it felt like almost like a burning. Like if your throat was burning, that's what it felt like to me. That was the most uncomfortable symptom, I think. And same thing for him. And that sore throat lasted about 2 weeks. Oh, and loss of taste. I mean, now we know. Yep, now we know that's like the common one. But back then, I'm like, wait, he doesn't want to eat? That's not like my husband to not eat.
So like I'll put stuff in front of him, right? And he's not like, taking it.
He's usually everything, like food, equal opportunity. And then our little guy, he's like that too. But with COVID, with my kiddo, he had even less. He had a runny nose for 2 days, a sore throat for 1 day, no fever, no shortness of breath, nothing. And so when we consulted with the infectious diseases, they all said, yes, you got a milder strain of it, or a milder variant is what they call it. But at the end of the day, you kind of don't know how you're going to be until you get it. But all we're hearing is people dying. We're not hearing enough of like, hey, how did you recover? What vitamins did you take? How did you boost your immune system?
What's the supplements that you took? Right. That's like when you told me, I'm like, what did you take?
What did you take? What would you start if somebody started on a fever or started having a cough? Like these would be the things that we should be sharing, not, you know, doom and gloom, because that's not really going to help. And it certainly wouldn't have helped me then too. So it took a while though. I mean, we were in a special situation in that he had to test negative to go back to work. It took him 5 weeks.
It took him 5 weeks to test negative.
You don't even know this because the last time I talked to you, he was still testing positive, even though the symptoms only lasted 2 weeks for him, about a week and a half for me, and 2 days for my son. He did not test negative until 5 weeks later. 5 weeks.
Oh my gosh. So do you think that then he would probably be more susceptible to infect somebody else if he was still positive going out?
And that was the fear, because obviously nobody knows. And that's the problem with this, is that it's inadequate data. It's not even bad data. It's just not complete. So we don't know, does he have immunity? Is he going to spread it to somebody else? Is he just keeping it within his systems? Is it just leftover viral particles? Like nobody knows. If the top infectious disease people in this country don't know, nobody knows. And so on the safe side, they said, stay home. And I'm like, part of me was like, oh, well, you know, you're home, and that never happens. But on the other side, it's like, is this going to come back? Like, do we still have it? Are we contagious? So we quarantined for almost that entire time until he came back negative. We just were afraid of hurting a neighbor or a friend or somebody. And it was just better to stay within the walls of our house for that time.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's so mind-boggling, because I know that when we had spoken, this was like a month ago, and your family was just going through this, and you know, this is when we didn't really know much about anything, but you were saying how, you know, your son only had symptoms for like 2 days, and there was no fever and no runny nose. And then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, maybe my son had it as well, because he's been sick all throughout February, and we just don't know, right? We don't know. And you guys had you obviously had a milder strand, if there are more than a few strands, we don't know either. But I mean, it's interesting because it obviously did affect you in a different way. And so tell us how it kind of shaped your world for those weeks, and how, what are some of those things that we can do, even with our own mindset, and what you guys did as a family.
Yeah, I think that the whole COVID experience as a whole is obviously, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of what we don't know. There's a fear of how are we going to present. There's just a lot of heavy, big, elevated emotions. And I think when he tested positive, and obviously when he had the fever first, more than the test, listen, if you test positive, they tell you to go home and rest unless you have shortness of breath. So as far as treatment wise, did the test really help us? Other than knowing what it was, not in our case, right? But
Right.
for what I felt, I mean, when his fever was literally within 3 hours, elevating, but it didn't go beyond 102, it is fear, it is panic. And I think it takes a conscious effort to slow that down and go, wait a second, like it might not get worse. Don't just go to it's going to get worse, because
Right.
it almost makes the situation worse when you're panicking on top of the fear, on top of the fever, on top of a month ago we had no idea what this was. And so
Right.
it's just a lot of really reactive, elevated emotions. And I think that for
And it just makes it
us,
worse.
it makes it worse.
Yeah.
And for me as a chronic pain patient, I'm a little more sensitive because elevated stress elevates my pain. And so I have a physical indication for when I am feeling more stress. And so we had to be conscientious about it. If not, I don't think we would have been sane getting through this. Not that this is a sane process whatsoever, but I think that we really had to be intentional with, can we only deal with today? I think slowing down so much. Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about next week. Don't think about
Right.
2 weeks from now. Like if that was the case 5 weeks later, we would have been like,
My God.
we would have had all of our adrenaline run out. So I think if there's one thing that I could tell anyone, that if they're having COVID symptoms or if they're feeling a little run down and they're going, oh my God, is this what it is? It might not be the case that goes to the hospital. Obviously, we had a milder case. We don't have respiratory issues. We're otherwise healthy other than some of my immune stuff. But honestly, we're not the most compromised family. But that being said, we had to take the intention. Like I was meditating with my son. I mean, meditating with my son looks like literally sitting in my meditation room and watching the birds outside for a minute. That's what meditating with a 7-year-old looks like, right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Praise
put
yourself if
you
can sit down.
Right? I do that all the time. I've been doing that with him for like 2 years. I put a toy on his belly and just watch it go up and down. You know, it's simple stuff. And so I think that because it helps me so much, I knew that having my family do that too in their own way, that was really important. So I think there's a lot when it comes to the psychological immune system and whether we spiral into this really dark place that weakens everything versus what can we do right now, today, and focus on that. I think that's the best thing we can do. And sometimes when you feel really crappy, the best thing you can do is slow it down to like whatever you can handle, even if that's only 1 minute in the moment that it sucks.
True.
Handle a minute. If you can handle a little more, think about the next hour. If you can handle a little more, think about the next day. That's it. And that really helped when it came to dealing with COVID.